In today's video, we're going to be talking about why Bitcoin could potentially see a retrace around a halving event of up to 40%. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video, and we're going to also be diving into each part of the cycle in a bit more detail to better understand these retraces and how we can prepare for that pre-halving retrace as a key checkpoint in accumulating Bitcoin for the post-halving rally to new all-time highs. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive right into it. So when we look at the 5 phases of the Bitcoin halving for Bitcoin, we can see that the pre-halving period is one phase, the light blue pre-halving rally is one phase, the reaccumulation period is one phase. Of course, the dark blue circled region is this pre-halving retrace, and then we have the parabolic rally to new all-time highs. So we're going to be focusing specifically on this pre-halving retrace period for Bitcoin, and we're going to first focus on this part of the cycle, which is 2016. So in this part of the cycle, where we had a accumulation range, we broke out from this accumulation range, retested it as a new support before rallying to new highs once again to form a reaccumulation period. This is where Bitcoin was consolidating for a substantial amount of time in preparation for this light blue pre-halving rally to new yearly highs. And then after we formed those new yearly highs, Bitcoin actually retraced minus 40%, and a fair portion of that retrace came in the form of a downside wick. And if you think about this downside wick, that retested the very top of this reaccumulation range right over here. The very top of that. So if you think about this reaccumulation range, it broke out, and then we got that post breakout reaccumulation range tap and retest of the range high as a new resistance before forming a reaccumulation range once again at highs to recover from this pre-halving retrace. So generally speaking, this pre-halving retrace was 40% deep, but it occurred only a handful of weeks before the halving event. So as a major checkpoint for potential reaccumulation, this pre-halving retrace really does fit the bill in terms of offering a discount on Bitcoin after a strong rally to new yearly highs. This was the case in 2016, and a 40% retrace, quite sizable. We might not see such a strong retrace in this current cycle, and we'll see going forward that 40% isn't always the case, but this is probably the worst case scenario for Bitcoin in this cycle if we do see a 40% retrace, and that would come as probably a flash wick as well, some sort of really black swan downside volatility, because arguably in 2016 the market was less mature, so we could see a lot of volatility, and you can see that volatility here in the upside wick, in the downside wick, some tremendous downside wicks generally in this cycle. But this market was less mature then, and so this sort of volatility was much more commonplace. So a 40% retrace to essentially mimic this in this cycle is a little bit less likely, and less likely in terms of probability, simply because of market maturity. The only reason we got this 40% retrace was because of really extreme price action. But once we recovered from this pre-halving retrace, we once again broke out from the reaccumulation period and turned it into a new support before rallying to new all-time highs. So generally speaking, you can see here that there is a real tendency of accumulation and sideways price action, breakout and then retest, then again sideways price action, breakout over here, and that retest comes later right over here. And then once again consolidation, and then breakout and then retest of the top of the reaccumulation range. So we've seen 3 ranges form, 2 of those being reaccumulation ranges, and this one being a bear market bottom accumulation range. 3 ranges formed, and each of them broke out, of course, but each of them also retested as new support. So if you see a range like this form in this cycle, for instance, then rest assured we'll probably see a retest of that range. And so we're going to quickly skip here, because if we look at this cycle and this was a reaccumulation range, then we've broken out already and we haven't retested it. So there is a chance that we could retest this level. That's just as a side note. But let's move on to 2019 here, because 2019 also saw a pre-halving retrace, but this time it was 19%. And of course, 19% pre-halving retrace, this occurred and was a bit more of a shallow retrace because we'd seen a major capitulation event only a few weeks prior to that. But once again, this pre-halving retrace occurs only a handful of weeks before the halving event. And notice how this pre-halving retrace, once it concludes, it also once again builds a reaccumulation phase. And you could argue that, generally speaking, this is the reaccumulation range, or you could even argue that this is the reaccumulation range, and then we form yet another one just above it. In any case, whatever you think about here, reaccumulation here, and then breakout and then retest of the top of that reaccumulation phase before further upside, then you can see here that any reaccumulation phase that develops, we break out from it and then turn it into a new support. So even if you miss out buying right over here on this pre-halving retrace, which of course I personally am going to be reaccumulating after a pre-halving retrace, but even if I miss that opportunity, a breakout and then post-breakout pull back into a retest, that would be the next best thing in terms of reaccumulating before trend simply continues towards the upside and enters that parabolic phase of the cycle. So if we think about these pre-halving retraces across time, they always follow a strong rally to not necessarily new yearly highs. Of course, in this cycle, it was new yearly highs, but here it wasn't new yearly highs. It was simply a rally. And this breakout rally over here, we then correct that with the pre-halving retrace. And over here, we saw an even bigger rally towards the upside, which then, of course, we also have to correct for. But this blue circle, or at least this blue period here, that's where we see trend continuation, or at least a V-shaped reversal, or a U-shaped reversal, or a breakout from a reaccumulation range that sets us up for the pre-halving retrace. So saying, for instance, that we're going to pre-halving retrace right now, well, first of all, we're not close to the halving. It has to be a pre-halving retrace that occurs a handful of weeks just before the halving. And at the same time, around 2 months before the halving is when we see a strong rally from Bitcoin, a strong breakout rally. So going into this halving event, generally speaking, with this still being in the pre-halving period where we could still see a deeper retrace, and after that deeper retrace, we could potentially see a strong rally occur in this period, just 2 months before the halving, and then we could correct for that pre-halving, in that pre-halving retrace, correcting after that strong rally. And of course, this pre-halving retrace could occur at higher price levels. And by the same token, that reaccumulation period, which is over here, this could occur also at higher levels. It really does depend where we top out for the year, because that's going to set the tone for early 2024, which is typically in early stages of the new halving year. That's where we can see deeper retracements, and one of the last deeper retracements in preparation for the halving. And this is where this rally comes into play, because if early 2024 is going to see a deeper retrace from Bitcoin, and that's still going to be in this pre-halving period, then we're going to see a strong recovery afterwards, going into the halving event where buyers are buying the hype and trying to sell the news to profit from this halving event from occurring. And then we're going to see that correction in the pre-halving retrace occur before we build yet another multi-week, maybe even multi-month reaccumulation period before we break out to those new all-time highs with time in the parabolic phase of the cycle, which is this green period. So people buying into the halving event, wanting to make a quick buck, will see that across cycles, it's simply more profitable not to necessarily short-term trade the halving event, but to long-term swing trade it, because simply in the short term, there isn't much scope for profitability as there is for just simply being patient and holding Bitcoin for the parabolic phase of the cycle. So many people get lost here in the pre-halving retrace. Many people get chopped up simply because we reaccumulate here. We see lots of price movements towards the upside, downside, consolidation generally speaking. and volatility in both directions, but this is what chops people up. And the thing here is to accumulate on that pre-halving retrace and then simply hold going into the halving event. Of course, if you look at previous cycles, for instance, if you re-accumulate on this pre-halving retrace and then break out, then this retest is another re-accumulation point. Generally, this re-accumulation period after the halving event is a re-accumulation point. Re-accumulation point. Pre-halving retrace offers a discount on Bitcoin. That's one re-accumulation point. And then this sideways price action is a re-accumulation point. And then retesting the top of those highs, you can see here a retest of that initial re-accumulation range before potentially forming another one. But generally speaking, any sideways price action after the halving is a great re-accumulation point to re-enter the market after having re-entered the market on the pre-halving retrace, the pre-halving retrace acting as a natural segue to that re-accumulation period that then sees Bitcoin break out to new all-time highs in the parabolic phase of the cycle. So Bitcoin could see a pre-halving retrace. It could be up to 40%. In the past, we've seen 20% on the pre-halving retrace. We've seen 40% on the pre-halving retrace. Could we see 20% to 40% in this pre-halving retrace as well? In any case, that's about it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.